Hello, folks. This is Paul Jansen, the pastor of United Reformed Church in Somerville, New Jersey, here with your bare bones meditation for this week, a meditation on the story from the Gospel of Luke, the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 11. Here's the story. Once while Jesus was standing beside the lake of Gennesaret and the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he saw two boats there at the shore of the lake. The fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. When he had finished teaching, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night long, but have caught nothing. Yet, if you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken, and so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching people." When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. Folks, sometimes a fish is just a fish, but not today. Not today. If you go through what we call the New Testament, there's all kinds of fish stories involving Jesus. There's the one about the little fella who comes and gives 5 loaves and 2 fish, and they feed 5,000. There's the story of the risen Jesus when he's on the shore eating some fish on charcoal, and he greets Peter, and there's a whole thing about Jesus restoring Peter, but before that, Jesus enabled, commanded, whatever you want to call it, a miraculous catch of 153 fish, 153 no less. There's the little parable Jesus offers about how much does God love you? Hey, even a kind of a relatively crummy, maybe compromised earthly father knows how to give his kid a fish when he asks for a fish instead of giving him a snake. Or anyway, he gives him a kosher fish instead of a non-kosher fish, which is probably what he said. But nevertheless, you get the point. Fish just don't seem to be just plain old fish in Jesus' economy. And then today's story, the story that's usually called the call of Peter. It is true that Jesus says to Peter, James, and John, "From now on you'll be catching people." But this comes on the heel of another great fish story, a miraculous catch, an awe-inspiring catch, a life-changing catch, the almost sank 2 boats worth of fish catch. Somehow with Jesus, fish are more than fish. Well, people already kind of knew that in Jesus' day, that fish were more than just fish. He and his friends circulated around the Sea of Galilee, and no surprise that the fishing economy was pretty central to life in their area. Fresh fish got into the hands of the more well-to-do folks who could send servants to the fishmongers in the morning, and they could buy the fish that were caught the night before, and they could eat them before they went bad. They bought the good ones. Probably something like what's called the Kinneret tilapia. Most folks, regular folks, ate the smaller fish, cured or salted sardines that were processed in Magdala, which happened to be the home of Mary Magdalene, which is relevant to nothing at the moment. Anyway, if you went to somebody's home for dinner and they served you tilapia, well, you might be careful about where you sat on their furniture and how. If, on the other hand, they served you the Kinneret sardines, well, they were, just good old folk. You get the picture. Fish were more than just fish. They were a status symbol. The kind of fish you ate was a tell for where you stood on the social ladder. Now you tell me, what do you think happens when a huge quantity of a commodity like fish hits the market all at once and it has to be processed or sold immediately? What happens to the price of that commodity? Well, you know what happens. It plummets, right? So when Jesus, a landlubber carpenter's son, when Jesus commands this massive haul of fish during daylight, no less, when everybody knows you never catch any fish, but what happens to this status symbol? This symbol that let you know who gets the good fish, who eats the lousy fish, who eats the common fish. What happens to the idea that only the hoity-toity folks get the tilapia? At Jesus' command, when there's this great abundance of fish and there's so much on the market that anybody can afford anything, and in fact the fishmongers want to give it away because they can't leave it on their tables for the next day, everybody gets a good fish. Everybody gets the good. And the abundance of fish here, the abundance of fish, it's more than just a bunch of lousy fish. The abundance of fish is a sign of God who provides generously for everyone. Blessed are the poor. God fills the hungry with good things. Taste and see that the Lord is good. This is a biblical theme. Well, it's all right there for people to see, if only they'd seen that a fish is more than just a fish. Now, what did Jesus see that they hadn't seen? He saw that right there in this ordinary staple of their lives, in the humdrum everyday fish of folks that people never gave much thought to and they were probably tired of eating, embedded top to bottom in their economy, right there under their noses, Jesus saw how God's kingdom was already present among them in the abundance of fish. They didn't have to wait until after they died or until some cataclysmic event to inherit God's kingdom. God's kingdom was manifest to them in the most common things. And it was precisely because the common things were so common that they learned of God's revolutionary love and how it turned everything upside down. You see, with Jesus, gone are the power structures that said Caesar is entitled to all the best things in life and everybody else just gets the scraps. With Jesus, gone are the arrangements that put 90% of the money into the hands of 5% of the population. With Jesus, gone are the internalized class divisions that told the wretched poor, that made them believe that they were made just to be wretched folks who their bodies just got used up and thrown out. That's what they thought they were made for. With Jesus, gone is the thought that material things like fish have nothing to do with spiritual matters. With Jesus, gone are these strict orders of creation that keep folks quiet and compliant and in their place, while those who wake up in the morning devising wickedness and put oil on their faces, while they drink all the best wine and eat the finest fish. With Jesus is a whole new world. A whole new world. When you think about it, should this come as any kind of surprise to us? Hadn't the angel told Mary that with God, all things are now possible? And didn't she sing, God puts down the mighty and lifts up the lowly? And didn't Jesus himself upset the apple carts by breaking Sabbath and eating with turncoats and sex workers and riding into Jerusalem on a donkey and turning tables in the temple and talking with a Samaritan woman in the middle of the day, etc., etc.? Didn't the earliest friends of Jesus get a reputation for going into towns where everybody knew how everything had been for generations and was supposed to be for generations to come, how these early friends of Jesus went into these towns and started turning everything upside down? Next time you eat fish, chew on that. Chew on the ways that, make this contrast. Chew on the ways that human kingdoms draw hard boundaries and hoard resources and go to war and keep refugees out and build grand symbolic structures that claim our heart's allegiance. Compare that with how God's kingdom crashes through all our carefully constructed boundaries of class and race and gender and religion and orientation and citizenship and power, how God's kingdom is a kingdom of abundance and generosity, demonstrated in the one who opened up his arms wide and died for love's sake. If you can see that kind of good news in a fish, well, then maybe you're ready for supper. Maybe you're ready for supper. On the face of it, what a ridiculous, miserly thing we do when the church gathers at the Lord's table. Less than an ounce of some not very tasty grape drink, a tasteless wafer of whatever that stuff is, some kind of feast. Try serving that at your next Thanksgiving dinner of your family. For that matter, just try serving it at dinner tonight. You won't get a very good reception, but somehow these signs, as humble as a cheap can of tuna and a dried up roll, these signs, these common signs are a pledge and foretaste of the feast of love of which we shall partake when Christ's kingdom has fully come, when we shall behold him and be made like unto him in all his glory. In these common things, the life of heaven touches earth. If we can see the abundance of heaven in a fish, and if God uses these crumbs to flood our systems with grace, just imagine how much of God's grace is at hand for you every day. Every day. In the water you get when you open your tap at home. You can drink it. How much grace is in the roof over your head that keeps you dry? In the hamburger you pick up at the drive-thru. Grace in the person who lets you go first. Grace in the artistry of musicians, as we experience so often with Justine's gifts. How much grace there is in the feel of the fabric of a shirt against your skin, in the smell of an oncoming snow or the musk of a sodden yard. Such abundance. Pay attention, and you'll find the signs of grace everywhere you turn. We are no more worthy of it than Peter was. But there it is. And here we are on this earth. Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God, said Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Once you get it, the sheer gracedness of all things, once you get it, pass on the good word. It's too good not to share. Well, that's the good word for today. I hope you're able to look around as I'm able to look around this room and see the signs of God's grace all around you, and give thanks and share the good news. That's all, folks. I'll see you next week.